Coming to, Forgotten Facts, a book which you wrote on Rani Durgawati. So again, it's very surprising that in this era where we talk a lot about, feminism and women's rights and all, Rani Durgawati's story is still something which is largely forgotten, and I'm sure there are not many books even written on it. Why is it that
No.
in a society which, as such, reveres women? I mean, there are issues, of course, but Hindu society traditionally it reveres women. We have several
Yes.
instances in our, epics in our books. Why is it that a queen, which fought, which was a warrior, a great administrator, she was forgotten in the annals of history?
तो देखिए ये बहुत ही दुख की बात है बिकॉज अगर आप देखें रानी दुर्गावती के जो कंटेम्पररी थे और ये लोग जो थे ये उनकी दुश्मन थे बट दे रिकॉर्ड her achievements with so much respect
Right.
because she was somebody who commanded that respect.
Yes.
So from her contemporaries, she got
Yes.
respect. They recorded her story. But we, in the last 50, 60 years, we've forgotten her. And there is a reason for that. And I have three theories why this has happened. एक तो देखिए रानी दुर्गावती का जो राज्य था गरा मंडला या गरा कटंगा, that was a tribal
Yes.
kingdom. Tribal kingdom in what is currently Madhya Pradesh. तो मध्य प्रदेश की जो जबलपुर है, जबलपुर, डिंडोरी, डामो, नरसिंहपुर, होशंगाबाद, मंडला, all these districts, they were all part of Rani Durgavati's kingdom. ठीक है, तो it was a very remote and it was a kingdom, it was a tribal kingdom. So that is the reason why our history books did not take that dynasty in general and Rani Durgavati in particular that seriously. देखिए हमारा ना इतिहास में एक skew है. If you notice, there is a North India skew. मतलब अगर दिल्ली में कुछ नहीं हुआ या पाटलिपुत्र में नहीं हुआ तो नहीं हुआ, you know. But हमारा भारत इतना डाइवर्स, इतनी बड़ी देश है कि हमारा जो इतिहास है, it has to be a patchwork quilt. हर जगह का अपनी अपनी इतिहास है, हर जगह का अपना हीरोज हीरोइंस है और उनका अपना अपना स्टोरीज होती है एंड वी कैनॉट अफोर्ड टू फॉरगेट दो स्टोरीज. रानी दुर्गावती के साथ जो हुआ ये और भी हुआ इसलिए क्योंकि उसकी जो मेन जो दुश्मन था जिसके कारण उसकी देहांत हुई in battle, that was Akbar. Now, Akbar has been turned into Akbar the Great in our history books.
Yes.
So he has been lionized so much in history that anybody who opposes him, you know, the other side, has become a footnote in his story.
True, very true.
So this is not just true of Rani Durgavati. There are others as well. There is another queen, a Muslim queen, who was a thorn in Akbar's side. Her name was Chand Bibi. कोई सुनता है?
Right.
किसी को मालूम भी नहीं है. So now the thing is that we have this tendency to lionize one character, and if you want to raise one character, the others will come under their shadow. So Rani Durgavati therefore became a footnote in her own story, and that is very unfortunate. And the other thing also is that our history has a very peculiar, you know, so there is a Delhi bias, there is a Mughal bias, then there is a male bias. That is the third thing. You know, so if you look at all the greats, na, Ashoka the Great, Akbar the greats are all men. But we have a very long tradition of very, very good queens.
Yes.
तो उन लोगों के बारे में तो पता होना चाहिए ना.
Absolutely.
तो उन लोगों के बारे में कंटेम्पररी सोर्सेस है, हमारे इतिहास में कंटेम्पररी सोर्सेस है, बहुत सारे कहानियां है, पर हमने उसको उतना ध्यान नहीं दिया जितना द ग्रेट्स को दिया.
Very true.
So that is the reason why she was forgotten.
I think now we can start. So I would like to give a brief introduction of Nandini before we start. So Nandini Sengupta is a Pondicherry-based journalist and an author of historical fiction and narrative history. After a chance visit to Ajanta and Ellora cave, she became fascinated with India's past in general and ancient and early medieval India in particular. After that, for the next 10 years, she studied history for fun, and when she began to write, it was history she turned to for material. Her book includes, of course, the book on Rani Durgawati, about which we'll be doing most of the talks. She is also known for the Gupta Empire trilogy, The King Within, The Poisoned Heart, and Ocean's 11, and most importantly, for the Blue Horse and other amazing animals from Indian history, for which she received the Sahitya Academy's Bal Sahitya Puraskar. So, Nandini, congratulations for the Academy Award. This, I
Thank you.
understand, it's a big feat, and
Yes.
we will definitely talk about Blue Horse, definitely. But I have one question before we start. You visited Ajanta Ellora and you became interested in history. So how it happened? Some epiphany hit you, or how did it go?
Yeah, it was like that almost. This was 2007, and it was a weekend. I remember it was sometime in August, and it was raining. Western Ghats were, lush green and all that. And my husband said, we have a weekend, we have a long weekend, so kahan chale? So I said, why don't we go to Ajanta Ellora? So off we went. And when I cannot tell you, I don't know whether you have been there. If you see the murals, they are just awe-inspiring, like, jaw-droppingly beautiful. I cannot even begin to tell you how beautiful they are. But that's just one part of the story. I'm not, I don't consider myself a great connoisseur of art or anything. What fascinated me was that, the faces that I was looking at on the walls of those caves were people like me. Their skin tones, and they were so diverse, just like we are today. We are not just a monochromatic people. We are very diverse. There are different shades of brown that we come under. The palette is very diverse, and so it is in Ajanta. And they are wearing these very, very exotic clothes, but in many ways the jewelry is very similar to what we still wear. The sari is a little bit different, but more or less, the kanchulika and the sari the format is still there. The men are still wearing dhotis. So I was quite fascinated. I said, oh my God, what am I looking at here? And remember, I didn't do history in college at all. I did English literature.
Okay.
So I had no idea about my country's history. And I used to find history boring. Most people find history boring. It's taught very badly in our schools and colleges. So, so I came back and I said I must find out more. And the other interesting thing is you have, tidbits there on the walls of those caves in Ellora particularly, which show that this was a very cosmopolitan people. There are Chinese dragons, for instance. There are Roman-style footwear. There are conical-hatted Phoenicians, and so on. So I was like, who are these people? And so I came back and I said, okay, fine, I'm going to be a lazy journalist and I'm going to write to somebody who knows more history than I do. So I Googled and I came across this gentleman's name. His name was Walter Spink, Dr. Walter Spink. He is an absolute authority. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he had spent 65 years focusing on India's Buddhist art in general and Ajanta Ellora in particular. Yeah, he's an absolute authority. He was with, I think, if I'm not mistaken, with the University of Michigan. So I got his email ID and I wrote to him. And I said, I'm this ignoramus journalist, and can you give me one book that will tell me everything? Like just one book. I want to have a crash course in history. And he wrote back saying, I am not going to make this easy for you. I am not Indian, and I have been documenting and researching ancient Indian history for 60 years. Why don't you know? Right. Why don't you know? I'm not going to make this easy for you. And he gave me a list of some 4 or 5 books. I realized that now that they were very basic. But it starts with Vincent Smith and goes on to, A.L. Basham and R.C. Mazumdar, Radha Kumud Mukherjee, more and more. And after a while, I realized that more I read, the more I was fascinated. And for the next 10 years, I just read history for fun. And at the end of that journey happened, The King Within happened. And you know, that's how my journey as an author began.
Wonderful. So I think it's thanks to Ajanta and Ellora caves we have
Yeah.
Nandini Sengupta as the historian right here in front of us. I wanted to talk about the blue horse because we all talk about history, and as you took a very different approach, you talked about history through animals. Now, when we talk about
Yeah,
history,
it's just right
yeah,
here. The book
the
is
blue
right here.
horse,
This is the blue
which
horse.
which
Yes.
helped you win the award as well. Very interestingly, I think it's
Yes.
a very unique idea because in history we talk about events and people. Animals are in that
Yeah.
sense, forgotten. And if anyone even remotely, links it to animals, they mostly links it to the horses because युद्ध हुआ था, लड़ाई हुआ था, वो
Yes.
horse पे
Yes,
हुआ था.
that's right.
Horses or
Huh.
elephants. And I think I'm sure in
Yes.
India, if you talk about the animals, people would only remember Chetak or Maharana Pratap. That's the
Ji.
only
Ji.
horse people remember, which found some
Yeah.
mention in history. There's a Samadhi Sthal for
Yeah.
Chetak in
Chetak.
Udaipur as
That's
well.
true.
So how
That's
did
true.
that idea came out of writing about animals?
तो देखिए, आई लव एनिमल्स एंड आई लव हिस्ट्री. मेरे लिए तो दोनों बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है और मुझे लगा कि एनिमल्स की पीओवी से हिस्ट्री हमने देखी नहीं.
Right.
मे बी इट इज देयर, आई डोंट नो, आई हैवंट सीन अ बुक दैट टेक्स द एनिमल्स पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू and talks about what the animal
Right.
feels. And there are, I said, why don't I look at some of the more interesting animals in history, and I started researching, and I found that while the obvious ones, Chetak and Badal, these are the two horses that everybody knows about. एक तो Rana Pratap, एक Rani Durgawati, Rani Jhansi Rani Lakshmibai. तो ये दोनों we know about. But what about the others? And I was looking at actual, what in history we have something called primary sources. Matlab, information that
Sorry
comes to us
to interrupt you,
from the
Nandini.
time.
Sorry for interrupting you, but your voice was breaking. Very, very sorry,
Okay,
but
so in
yeah.
history, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in history, when you are researching, there is something called primary sources.
Yes.
Matlab, whatever happened, the person who is reporting on that is a contemporary. So so you get information that is first hand. ठीक है ना? So when I started researching, I had some very very interesting primary sources. एक तो मुझे पता नहीं, बहुत लोगों को शायद मालूम नहीं होगा, साउथ में, particularly कर्नाटका, तमिलनाडु में ना, एक चीज होती है हीरो स्टोन्स. तो विलेजेस में होती है. The hero stones are like a time capsule, like a WhatsApp message from the past. ठीक है ना?
Yes.
So मान लीजिए एक छोटा सा एक गांव है, उसमें एक छोटी सी मंदिर है. ठीक है? उस मंदिर के सामने आपको ये हीरो स्टोन्स मिलेगी, और इस हीरो स्टोन में जो लिखा होगा, एक थोड़ा छोटा सा एक इंस्क्रिप्शन होगी और एक तस्वीर भी होगी inscribed on the hero stone, and it documents something, an event that is very important to the village. मतलब उसको, मतलब in the larger scheme of things it is not very important. It can be कि एक wild boar आ गया था और उसको so and so ने उसको मार डाला और हम लोगों को बचा लिया. That is very important for the village. तो उसको उन्होंने बहुत अच्छी तरह से डॉक्यूमेंट किया होता है in these hero stones. They are very common. Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, this region is full of hero stones. And the interesting thing is that there are so many hero stones that are dedicated to dogs.
Oh,
because हाँ, very interesting. क्योंकि क्या होता था ना, village में, the village dogs used to also act as watchdogs and guardians of the village. तो मान लीजिए कि कोई जैकॉल अटैक हो गया, या कोई वाइल्ड बोर अटैक हो गया, या बाहर से कोई बैंडिट्स आ गए, कोई आ गया, thieves आ गए, चोर वगैरह, तो the dogs would be the first line of defense. They would go and bark, and they would attack and whatever. And there are many dogs which have shown such a lot of courage, and they have given their lives protecting the village, and they have been immortalized in those hero
Right.
stories. So, I was quite surprised. I said, "Arey, ye to primary source hai."
Right.
And their dogs the names are mentioned. Kalia, jo hai, naam hai uske. Who is this dog? This dog belongs to so and so person, and this is what this dog did. Matlab, it's like a proper journal ka, जैसे हम journal में लिखते हैं
Right.
वैसे clear information. So then I said, Arey, this is
Right.
very interesting. So then I said, why don't I do more research and see if I can get more examples, and not just dogs. I mean, dogs, theek hai, the Shivaji's dog Wagya is very
Right.
famous. There's a Smriti Sthal for him as well. His statue is there in Raigad. So there are so many others. Alexander's dog and horse, Bucephalus
Yes.
and Peritus, they are very famous. So I said, but I can't have an entire book full of dogs and horses, right? So then I came across Rani Durgawati's elephant,
Oh.
Sarman. And it is a fascinating story because she used to think of him as her older son.
Right.
उसका मतलब जैसे her son, her human son and her elephant son were no different
Right.
to her, and there are hundreds of songs about her and Sarman. तो अभी भी अगर आप जबलपुर में जाए, जबलपुर के आउटस्कर्ट्स में समाधि स्थल है
Yes.
रानी जी का, तो बहुत सुंदर है. इट्स वेरी ब्यूटिफुली मेंटेन्ड एंड बहुत सुंदर जगह. तो वहां अगर आप जाए तो वहां पे आपको रानी जी की मूर्ति मिलेगी और सरमान का भी.
Saman.
और जो गोंद है, ट्राइबल गोंद पॉपुलेशन है, वो दोनों को पूजा
Yes.
करते हैं. दियाबाती पूजा होती है,
Right.
दोनों को होती है. मतलब इट्स सो बिकॉज सरमान इज सो इम्पोर्टेंट टू रानी दुर्गावती. तो ऐसे कर करके ना आई गॉट सेवरल एग्जाम्पल्स. देयर वाज अ पैरट that was I came across that example. There was a giraffe that I came across. There was a gazelle I came across. So it became like, the more I researched, I had these animals like jumped out.
Right.
Out of history and said, time you told the story from our point of view, and that's how this book happened.
Wonderful. I think it's definitely a one of its kind books that is again a forgotten, you can say, fact of our
Yeah.
history of our life. So coming to forgotten facts, a book which you wrote on Rani and Durgawati. So again, it's very surprising that in this era where we talk a lot about feminism and women's rights and all, Rani Durgawati's story is still something which is largely forgotten, and it's I'm sure there are not many books even written on it. Why is it that in a society which as such reveres women? I mean, there are issues, of course, but Hindu society traditionally, it reveres women. We have several instances in our epics, in our books. Why is it that a queen which fought, which was a warrior, a great administrator, she was forgotten in the annals of history?
देखिए, ये बहुत ही दुख की बात है, बिकॉज अगर आप देखें रानी दुर्गावती के जो कंटेम्पररी थे, और ये लोग जो थे ये उनकी दुश्मन थे, बट दे रिकॉर्ड her achievements with so much respect,
Right.
because she was somebody who commanded that respect.
Yes.
So from her contemporaries, she got
Yes.
respect. They recorded her story. But we, in the last 50, 60 years, we've forgotten her. And there is a reason for that. And I have three theories why this has happened. एक तो देखिए, रानी दुर्गावती का जो राज्य था, गरा मंडला या गरा कटंगा, that was a tribal
Yes.
kingdom. Tribal kingdom in what is currently Madhya Pradesh. तो मध्य प्रदेश की जो जबलपुर है, जबलपुर, डिंडोरी, डामो, नरसिंहपुर, होशंगाबाद, मंडला, all these districts, they were all part of Rani Durgawati's kingdom. ठीक है. तो it was a very remote, and it was a kingdom, it was a tribal kingdom. So that is the reason why our history books did not take that dynasty in general and Rani Durgawati in particular that seriously. देखिए, हमारा ना इतिहास में एक skew है. If you notice, there is a North India skew. मतलब अगर दिल्ली में कुछ नहीं हुआ या पाटलिपुत्र में नहीं हुआ तो नहीं हुआ, but हमारा भारत इतना डाइवर्स, इतनी बड़ी देश है कि हमारा जो इतिहास है, इट हैज टू बी अ पैचवर्क क्विल्ट। हर जगह का अपनी अपनी
Yes,
इतिहास है, हर
true.
जगह का अपना हीरोज हीरोइंस है, और उनका अपना अपना स्टोरीज होती है, एंड वी कैनॉट अफोर्ड टू फॉरगेट दो स्टोरीज। रानी
Of
दुर्गावती
course.
के साथ जो हुआ, ये और भी हुआ इसलिए क्योंकि उसकी जो मेन जो दुश्मन था, जिसके कारण उसकी देहांत हुई in battle, that was Akbar.
Right.
Now, Akbar has been turned into Akbar the Great in
Yes.
our history books. So
Yes.
he has been lionized so much in
Exactly.
history that anybody who opposes him, the other side, has become a footnote in his story.
True. Very true.
So this is not just true of Rani Durgavati. There are others as well. There is another queen, a Muslim queen, who was a thorn in Akbar's side. Her name was Chand
Chand
Bibi.
Bibi.
कोई सुनता है?
Right.
किसी को मालूम भी नहीं
मालूम भी
है.
नहीं.
So now the thing is that we have this tendency to lionize one character, and
Yes.
if you want to raise one character, the others will come under their shadow. So Rani Durgavati therefore became a footnote in her own story, and that is
Absolutely.
very unfortunate. And the other thing also is that our history has a very peculiar, so there is a Delhi bias, there is a Mughal bias, then there is a male
Yes.
bias. That is the
Right.
third thing. So if you look at all the greats, Ashoka the Great, Akbar the Great, the greats are
All
all
men.
men. But we have a very long tradition of very, very good queens.
Yes.
तो उन लोगों के बारे में तो पता होना चाहिए ना.
Absolutely.
तो उन लोगों के बारे में कंटेम्पररी सोर्सेस है, हमारे इतिहास में कंटेम्पररी सोर्सेस है, बहुत सारे कहानियां है, पर हमने उसको उतना ध्यान नहीं दिया जितना द ग्रेट्स को दिया है.
Very true.
So that is the reason why she was forgotten.
Very true. And I think as Vikram Sampath rightly mentioned, and in fact, I think he's the only one who had a chapter on Chand Bibi in his book Brave of Bharat. And before that, I'm sure many people won't. And he said that, history is the handmaiden of victors. And
Yes.
that's how it is. Unless until, the lions have their own historians, the tales will always glorify the hunter because he's the one who hunted
Absolutely.
it. But as you rightly mentioned,
Absolutely.
so that is there that it is the handmaiden of victors as well as several other biases. As I've talked to several historians, they say it's Delhi-based, Delhi-centric or,
Yeah.
Northern India-centric. And plus we had,
Yeah.
our history books, in fact, the overall narrative, whether it's history or polity, it was dominated by the leftist Marxist historians. And no wonder what
Yes.
we read was very one-sided. So, example, the Mughals, they were an important dynasty, but there were many, and not the only
Many
one. And many
others
people,
as well. Yes.
absolutely, many other they think that Mughals are the only dynasty. Mughal से पहले कुछ इंडिया जैसे था ही नहीं. So Mughals ने जैसे इंडिया को बनाया, and then Britishers ने rule करा. And interestingly, there are people who would say that English did the right thing by ruling us. They were savaging the
My God.
yeah, that's how it is. Especially, unfortunately, it is the case with the young people. They are of the view, not everyone, but many. They are of the view that Britishers actually made India and all. But thankfully, we have historians like you who are definitely bringing the truth. So another question about Durgavati is that आपकी book में जो mentioned है about her bravery, about her valor. There's a chapter which also talks about how good she was as an administrator. So if you can
Yes.
tell a bit about that, her administrative skills and where she ruled the kingdom.
So देखिए, यहाँ once again I want to point out that when you ask about queens of India, lay person, no, I'm not talking about historians, lay persons को अगर आप पूछेंगे तो वो दो नाम करेगी normally. एक है झांसी रानी लक्ष्मीबाई, she is a वीरांगना, and the second one is Razia Sultan. Now, both of these characters, Lakshmi Bai, of course, is a symbol of resistance.
Yes.
Because she was never allowed to rule. No? She never got the chance. And Razia Sultan ruled only for 3 years. So you have to take a monarch who has a decent amount of time. No, she gets time to actually govern her people.
Yes.
Now, there are many examples of that, but Rani Durgavati is a particularly fine example. because to her people, if you go today, and I did that हमारे फील्ड वर्क के अंदर, गोंद समाज के जो लोग हैं, गोंद जो बैलेडियर्स हैं ना, गाना गाते हैं, उन लोगों से हमने बात किया, young women who come and give दियाबाती पूजा to रानी दुर्गावती, तो उन लोगों से मैंने बहुत अच्छी तरह से बात किया. So they say that for them रानी दुर्गावती is the perfect monarch, ideal. मतलब जैसे कि हम सोचते हैं ना कि हम राम राज्य में रह रहे हैं, you know, perfection, वैसे, because historically she was a
Yes.
very very good administrator. तो उन्होंने क्या किया? Two things she did which were very important. Number one was that she in her as regent for Veer Narayan. Veer Narayan was her son who was the king and she was the regent. So in those 15 years she faced more than 50 attacks, 52 or 53 attacks. तो आप सोच लीजिए. So she never had the chance to settle down and say, okay, fine, I have settled my neighbors, they will not attack me anymore, now I can focus. She was always battle ready. She had to be.
Yes.
So, but she remained undefeated, unvanquished for all of those attacks except the last one in which she lost her life.
Yes.
She took her own life. When she realized she wasn't going to win, she took her own life. But other than that, she remained unvanquished. So her people had this sense of security कि रानी जी है तो सब ठीक हो जाएगा. Rani ji will take care of us. You know, so sense of security. She ensured that. The other thing she did was that, you know, this area is very close to Bundelkhand.
Yeah.
This is very parched land. So she realized that she had to make this kingdom of hers self-sufficient in agriculture, right?
Yeah.
And you're not getting enough rain. तो उन्होंने इतने ताल तलाव इतने सारे किया, and she was known as the Tal Talao Rani.
Yeah.
Right? More than 50
Right. Yes.
Tal Talao, small or big ponds, lakes were dug by her. And as a result, what happened was that that area, which was a rain-parched, barren, forested land, became a grain bowl. So itne ugate the, they used to export grain to Gujarat and to the Deccan. So she not only ensured security of her people, she also ensured prosperity because their agriculture improved, and she would also export forest produce. Like elephants were much in demand. You know, they were very important for medieval warfare and all that. So elephants, but also things like timber, chironji seeds, all of this, bamboo. These were all stuff that she exported, and so the country that stayed, her kingdom became very very rich. And so the people also were very happy with her, and she was very decentralized. Matlab, the kingdom was divided into Gar matlab Gar district, one fortress and the district around the fortress.
Right.
So the Gars were all handled by local rajas, and the villages were handled by Patwaris or Patels. And only if something was not settled by these people would it come to her. And she would never give, say for instance, she would never give the death penalty. The worst punishment was you will be exiled.
Right.
So it was a very benign administration, you know, very benign. It looked after its people. It ensured their prosperity. It ensured their security. So to this day, she's seen as the perfect queen.
Absolutely. There is one very interesting aspect of Rani Durgawati's life. I think it's one of those rare instances of intercaste marriage, you can say. Now, as we often, you know, talk of, especially in these times, the caste system is something which unfortunately is, you know, still very much alive, prevalent, and not a system, it's actually the caste discrimination, which is unfortunately still prevalent. Many activists and, you know, authors and all, they label Hinduism as, you know, predominantly caste based, that आप कल्पना नहीं कर सकते Hinduism की without the caste and all. Here we have in history like 400-500 years back, wherein there was an intercaste marriage. How
Yes.
do you see that?
तो देखिए मैं दो शब्द बोलना चाहती हूँ ये अबाउट दिस होल हवा ना कि हिंदुइज्म इज ऑल अबाउट कास्ट एंड ऑल दैट एक तो intercaste marriages were rare among the royalty, but they were not unknown. They
Yeah,
were not unknown. There are many, many examples of Rajputs marrying Huns or Huns. Hun princesses, Hun princesses were married by Rajputs. There are examples. Ruhila Kumar Alatta married Hun princess Hariya Devi. This was about around the 11th century, 1035, 1040, whatever, early part of 11th century. There are many examples of that. It's not a new thing. There are many examples of Kshatriyas marrying, lower castes, or Kshatriyas marrying Brahmins. There are examples of royalty also. I mean, royalty I'm talking about because क्या होता है ना, when royalty does something, it is
yeah,
documented by history. हम और आप अगर करेंगे तो उसको उतनी अच्छी तरह से डॉक्यूमेंट शायद
exactly.
नहीं हो पाएगी, बट विथ रॉयल्स इट इज डॉक्यूमेंटेड.
True.
तो ऐसे होती है. तो सो इट वाज नॉट अनहर्ड ऑफ. But in the case of Rani Durgavati, it is very interesting because she is a Chandel Rajput princess. Her father, Salibahan, was the ruler of Rat Mahova, which was a branch line of the Chandels. So, yet she falls in love with a tribal prince because the Gons, they were called Raj Gons. So the Gons, the originator of the Gond dynasty, Yadu Rai or Yadav Rai, had married, was a so there are differences. Some people say he was a Brahmin, some people say he was a Kshatriya, but he married a Gond princess, Ratnabali. So that is one example that is there in the Gond dynasty. And this one where she falls in love with her husband, Dalpat Shah, and her father wanted a Swayamvar, and Dalpat was not, he was not invited, obviously. He's a tribal Gond prince. And so she runs away. She elopes with him and gets married to him. And this, for Dalpat and for the Rajgons, this was a big deal because she was not only known for her beauty, but she was also a
Yes.
Chandel Rajput. Na? So you get, your lineage gets connected to the Chandels. But also because she became such a favorite of her people, they loved her so much that they have turned her into a goddess.
Yes.
If you go, you will see tribal Gond जो होते हैं ना, उनको पूजा करते हैं.
Yes.
Like, because she is named after goddess Durga. So like her celestial namesake, she is considered a goddess by her people to this day. And this year, 2024, is her 500th birth anniversary. So for 500 years, her people have not forgotten her.
Right. I think that is very important because at least as I mentioned, I remember I talked to you last time. I said that the history about Rani Durgavati and other such people, it's to an extent largely localized. People in their regions know,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
good to see that at
yeah,
least in those regions she is revered. She's getting the respect she deserves even after her death.
yes,
And last
yes.
question related to Rani Durgavati is that you have researched a lot. You've written this beautiful book which covers her life
Thank you.
in quite detail.
Yeah.
Uh, in short, what you think is the legacy of Rani Durgavati?
I think the legacy of Rani Durgavati is she defines modernity and feminism for Indian women. What happens is हम जब सोचते हैं modern Indian women, हम जब नारीवाद के बारे में सोचते हैं, वो Western construct हो जाते हैं. The feminism that we have is a hand-me-down version from the West. But Rani Durgavati exemplifies Indian Western, Indian feminism, where you can very easily sort of merge your sacred duties with your secular duties. You can be as feminine as you can be, but you can also be a fierce warrior. You can be both the epitome of beauty, but you can also be one of the most fearsome generals in the battlefield. You can be everything. You can be multifaceted. You are at no point do you ever see Rani Durgavati behaving like a man. But if you go to Jabalpur, you will find she's always shown wearing chain mail with her talwar, haath mein
Yes.
talwar leke. So she is not a coy symbol of femininity, but she is also
Yes.
feminine. She is fierce
True.
feminine, right? So this combination of not uh, feminism means you have agency, you have control over your life, over your destiny. And if that is the description for feminism, then there is no better idol, no better symbol of Indian feminism than Rani Durgavati.
Absolutely. I think that for me is the key takeaway of this discussion. You have actually beautifully explained what feminism actually should mean to people, and need
Yeah.
not be a direct copy of what we see in the West. So one question regarding history writing, as we discussed, we are seeing. Especially since past couple of years, though interestingly, we have lot many history books being written, and we have fortunately now authors like you who are uncovering these unknown facets of history. आज हम एक dichotomy देखते हैं, distinction देखते हैं between left wing history and right wing history. Interestingly, many
True.
times the left wing historians and right wing historians are at the opposite ends of the spectrum. So there are points of disagreements, severe disagreements. As a historian, how do you see this gap of left wing and right wing historians?
देखिए, I don't consider myself a historian. I consider myself a journalist. मैं पत्रकार पहले हूँ, और मुझे लगता है कि इतिहास लिखने में भी एक पत्रकार जैसे अगर आपका जो विजन है वो अगर एक पत्रकार जैसे होगी तो आप में बायस नहीं होगी. You will. I don't want to look at history through the lens of a prism कि ये ism से Marxist
Right,
history or
right.
Freudian history or feminist history. I don't want to look at it. I want to look at it like a story. I will go, I will talk to everybody, I will look at all the evidence, I will look at primary sources, and I will write it as a journalist would write a story. So that's the way I look at it, because I always say that I'm a journalist first and foremost, and that's how I look at it. But जैसे आप बात कर रहे हैं कि right wing historians, left wing historians, it is true that a lot of these biases that we have today in history writing are the legacy of the left-wing historians, and that it's only now in the last 6-7 years that we have some fantastic alternative voices of history that have come up. Vikram Sampath ji is a case in point. Sanjeev Sanyal ji is a case in point. Meenakshi Jain ji, matlab, Namaste hai wo. She is doing incredible. She's always been doing incredible amount of work. It's just that now people are getting, her voice is getting
Yes.
disseminated further and further, and people are getting to read more about the
True.
kind of work that she is doing. So there are so many people. Vivek Debroy ji, he has done such fantastic translation of
Yes.
our sacred
Yes.
texts. So there are many, there are very strong history voices like Swapan Dasgupta ji, whose erudition is, you cannot question their erudition or the depth
Oh,
of
yes.
their scholarship.
Right.
So,
Right.
you have so many people who are doing such great, very, very good work, not just ancient and medieval India, but also more contemporary India,
Yes.
freedom struggle and so on. So, so this work is very important. क्योंकि क्या होता है ना, you cannot just have one particular point of view.
Yes.
In any discipline, जो भी हो, because at the end of the day, a book is a point of view. जो भी हो, whichever book you take, it is at the end of the day the point of view of the author. Now, if you have only one point of view, then what you're trying to say is that there is no diversity of opinion
Yes.
in this particular subject, and that cannot, for a subject like history, that cannot
course.
be the set rule. It's not right. It's not good for the community and for the culture that it represents as well. So it's a great thing that we have alternative voices that are coming up. It's a great thing that a lot of people who are writing history are looking at it from fresh perspectives, fresh points of view, and we are getting a whole lot of books which offer history from a different angle.
No, no, very true. That's very true. In fact, the word itihas actually means as it happened, and unfortunately, it became
Yeah,
how it has been told rather than how it happened.
yeah,
So, one last question before we open it to the audience. So, all those who are watching, if you have any questions, you can please write in the comment box, and I'll take it up. So, Nandini, your trilogy of the Gupta Empire. How different or how difficult it is to write, which is something like which is a mix of फैक्ट एंड फिक्शन. तो आपको आपका जो इंस्पिरेशन है वो हिस्ट्री है, जो हिस्टोरिकल फैक्ट्स हैं. आपको जो लिखना है वो फिक्शन लिखना है, एक नॉवल की तरह लिखना है. उसमें आप सिर्फ फैक्ट्स नहीं डाल सकते, आपको थोड़ा सा उसको इंटरेस्टिंग बनाना है, बिकॉज यू हैव टू मेक श्योर कि पीपल लाइक रीडिंग इट. एक हिस्टोरियन के लिए जैसे हमने बायसेस की बात करी, आप कहीं ना कहीं तो हिस्ट्री से ही इंस्पायर हो रहे हैं. कहाँ आपको अपना बायस रखना है, कहाँ आपको प्योर फिक्शन रखना है, कहाँ उसको entertaining banana hai. Keeping all this in mind, how different you think it is to write historical fiction?
देखिए, historical fiction is actually very interesting and in some ways more difficult to write than pure history, because pure history में आपका ये information है, you are writing it in an engaging manner and that's it, right? But in historical fiction you have to spin a story. Yes. तो इतिहास में पूरा स्टोरी तो आपको मिलेगी नहीं, सो यू हैव टू देन ऐड एलिमेंट्स. तो माय फेवरेट हिस्टोरिकल, आई लव हिस्टोरिकल फिक्शन, मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगता है. मैं बचपन से मुझे पढ़ने में अच्छा लगता है. वन ऑफ माय फेवरेट हिस्टोरिकल फिक्शन राइटर्स is a gentleman whose name is Sharadindu Bandyopadhyay. He is more well known, he's a Bengali writer, he's more well known for his detective character called Byomkesh Bakshi. So, but he writes first-rate historical fiction. I cannot tell you how good he is, and he explains this dichotomy very well. He says historical fiction is like building a house. तो उसके जो फाउंडेशन है वो हिस्ट्री है, प्योर हिस्ट्री. पर फाउंडेशन के ऊपर वॉल्स भी है, दीवारें, दरवाजे, खिड़की, और घर के अंदर आपने फर्नीचर भी रखा हुआ है, उसमें कारपेट भी है, वो सब फिक्शन है. सो यू आर एडिंग, you are giving the reader a time travel experience. It's like I'm getting into the time machine and I'm going back in time to that period, Gupta era in my case. So you have to imagine, right? क्योंकि उतना डिटेल तो आपको डिटेल्स मिलेगी, but उतना that dramatized feeling you will not get. So you're imagining it. So you're adding fictional elements to it. Keeping the history arc straight, you're adding fictional elements to it.
Yes.
Layering it. And in the trilogy, you have the main characters in all three books. They are the Gupta emperors, Chandragupta, Vikramaditya, Samudragupta, and Skandagupta. These are the three Gupta emperors. So the main character, male character, protagonist, is a historical character. And there are many, many characters which are historical. Kalidasa is there, Varaha Mihir is there, Veerasena is there, Harisena is there, all the queens, Datta Devi is there, Dhruva Swamini is there. So all of these characters are actual historical characters, but you also have fictional characters, So you kind of mix the two, and the foundation and some parts of the walls are actual history, but बाकी fiction है.
Yes.
And I always urge my readers कि आप अगर historical fiction पढ़ रहे हो तो उनका forward को अच्छी तरह से जरूर पढ़िएगा, क्योंकि नहीं तो आपको लगेगा कि आपने जो पढ़ा है वो पूरा के पूरा हिस्ट्री है, पूरा के पूरा इतिहास है. पूरा के पूरा नहीं होती, वो थोड़ी बहुत इतिहास होती है, थोड़ी बहुत इमेजिनेशन होती है. और where the line is आपको पता चलेगा अगर आपने forward को अच्छी तरह से पढ़ लिया हो. So please do read the forward so that you can, because historical fiction can be a very good way of learning history. Very good way.
Very true. Cool. So we have one question from that bookworm guy. First is amazing session, Abhishek. Thank you so much. And we have two questions for Nandini.
Thank you.
Yeah, which is your favorite, Nandini? Which is favorite historical character or figure? And I think second question on it. So yeah, which is your favorite historical character?
So My favorite one, I will take one male and one female. The female character is obviously Rani Durgawati. She is my icon. I cannot think of a more modern woman than her. And if I have to pick a male character, then I would like to pick Samudragupta. Because everybody, Chandragupta Vikramaditya is also a very well-known, famous king, and he's become part of legends and all that. But Samudragupta के बारे में उतना नहीं पता चलती है, and he was an exceptional king. Exceptional king. Not only was he a great warrior and a conqueror, but he also he was a musician. He was a multifaceted man, and he was also somebody who was quite comfortable with sharing public space with his wife. So you have gold coins where, you have the emperor and empress, both of their, likenesses on the gold coin. So there are not too many examples of this anywhere in the world of kings sharing their public platform with their wife or with their queen. Not too many examples.
True.
So he is a very unusual monarch and a very unusual man.
That's That's very true. So the second question is, you mentioned about the male bias and the Delhi bias and the Mughals bias. This is a little tough one. How do you make sure that your writings are free from bias, considering every human has a point of view of their own?
I don't. I never claim that there is absolutely zero bias in my writing. I can't, because I'm human, right? So I am only telling you that I am giving you the facts as a journalist, as I have found it, and I am presenting them to you in a manner that is engaging to the best of my abilities. All I want you as a reader, if you are truly interested, is to read this book, and then if you want to know more or you want a different point of view, please do your own research and come up with that research. That's the best way to learn history, because that's how, more and more and more people are going to read. They're going to do their own research. They're going to find out for themselves. That's what this is all about. So no, I cannot say that my book is 100% free of bias. I'm sure I'm totally biased about Rani Durgawati. That's a historical figure that I have fangirled for the longest time. And I have tried to show places where she took wrong decisions, or maybe her call, the whatever decision that she was taking was not heeded by the people around her, or whatever. There may be some areas where my respect for her has given it a twist or a bias. That is true. And it has to be, like I said, every book is a point of view. How do you counter that point of view? By doing your own research.
Of course.
Take this as a starting point and do your own research.
That's a wonderful answer, I must say. You are absolutely, okay with admitting that, yes, as a human being, you too can have biases. There is a comment from Arundhati, just not a question, it's a comment. I love the book. I read the book. So good, I immediately fell in love with the style Nandini wrote. It's a factual history telling in fictional way, and Rani Durgawati. I even visited a palace in Jabalpur. Wow. Awesome. I think you can.
I think you're talking about Madan Mahal. Madan Mahal was her summer palace in Jabalpur.
I think you can think of having some sort of tie-up with Make My Trip, that when the people read my book, they will be booking their tickets. So I think that's a great way to promote tourism as well. But Nandini, it was wonderful talking to you. And thanks again for the time. And yes, your books are definitely beautifully written. Congrats again for the much deserved award. And only one thing is left, is that I have to get the book signed by you. So whenever you get a chance to visit Delhi, we'll catch up and I'll get the book signed.
I will stay. I will, for sure. Thank you for having me, and thank you so much. Thank you. I really enjoyed my session.
Same here. And thank you everyone who have joined. It was great to have you all here. Yeah. Thanks, Nandini.
Thank you.